The room sparkled with wealth, crystal chandeliers, golden cutlery, and men dripping in arrogance. At the center of it all, a millionaire smirked, his voice sharp as he barked orders at a young black waiter struggling to balance a tray. Every spilled drop, every tiny delay became an excuse for cruelty, for humiliation, all in front of a laughing crowd. The waiter stayed silent, his eyes calm, almost too calm, as if he knew something no one else did. But the millionaire had no idea that this man he belittled, mocked, and degraded was about to change his life forever. By the end of the night, the tables would turn, and the price of arrogance would be far greater than he ever imagined. The evening began like any other extravagant gathering of the city's elite, wealth dripping from every corner, power radiating from every handshake. The Grand Royale, an opulent five-star hotel, glowed like a jewel in the heart of downtown. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering reflections across polished marble floors, and a string quartet filled the air with a soft symphony that set the tone for what promised to be an unforgettable night of indulgence. Among the sharply dressed guests stood Vincent Harrow, a man whose name alone commanded respect, or rather fear, across business circles. A self-made millionaire, at least by his own telling, Vincent wore arrogance like a second skin. Everything about him, from the tailored Italian suit hugging his frame to the diamond-encrusted cufflinks that caught the light, spoke of excess. His booming laugh and commanding presence turned heads everywhere he went, and he loved that attention. In fact, he thrived on it. Vincent wasn't at this gala just for pleasure. To him, every event was an opportunity, a stage where he could assert his dominance and remind others of his so-called superiority. Tonight's occasion was a high-profile charity dinner, attended by CEOs, politicians, and investors who moved. Billions with a signature. For Vincent, this was more than networking. This was hunting ground. Every smile he flashed, every word he uttered, was calculated. Success was his oxygen, and humiliation of others, his guilty pleasure. As waiters glided across the room like shadows in crisp black uniforms, Vincent barely noticed them. At least, not until one particular waiter caught his attention. The man was young, tall, and striking in his composure. His uniform was spotless, his posture regal, almost defiant despite the subservient role he played. His skin glowed under the golden lights, and his calm expression didn't falter, even as he maneuvered through the demanding crowd. There was something about him, something that annoyed Vincent. Perhaps it was the air of quiet confidence that seemed out of place for a man carrying trays. To Vincent, this wasn't just a waiter. This was a target, a canvas for his cruelty. The man's name was Elijah Cole, though Vincent didn't care to know that. To him, Elijah was just another faceless servant in a sea of nobodies. Vincent's eyes followed him as he poured vintage wine into crystal glasses, his movements fluid, almost elegant. That poise made Vincent bristle. In his world, there was an unspoken rule. Those beneath you should know their place, and Elijah seemed far too comfortable in his skin. Vincent leaned back in his chair, swirling his glass of Chateau Margaux, a smug grin curling on his lips. Who does he think he is, walking around like that? The thought irritated him more than it should have. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was his inflated ego. But Vincent decided that tonight he would teach this waiter a lesson. A lesson about power, about status, about knowing one's place. The gala unfolded with its usual pomp, endless speeches about generosity, hollow applause, and the clinking of glasses as fortunes were flaunted under the guise of philanthropy. Vincent mingled with the crowd, his laughter booming as he shared exaggerated stories of his latest business triumphs. Yet, no matter where he went, his gaze flicked back to Elijah, who worked silently, gracefully, never breaking that calm demeanor. It irked Vincent to his core. In his mind, someone like Elijah should look overwhelmed, even nervous, serving men of his stature. Instead, Elijah moved like he belonged there, maybe even more than Vincent himself. And so, the games began. It started. Small. Vincent snapped his fingers, summoning Elijah from across the room like a king calling for his servant. When Elijah approached with measured steps, Vincent didn't even look at him. Instead, he held out his glass without a word, forcing Elijah to refill it in silence. When Elijah did, Vincent smirked and muttered something under his breath, just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. A joke at Elijah's expense. The men around him chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it was Vincent. Elijah didn't react. He neither flinched nor frowned. He simply offered a polite nod and stepped back, his expression unreadable. And that, more than anything, infuriated Vincent. He wanted a reaction. He craved it. What good was humiliation if the victim didn't squirm? So Vincent escalated. He started requesting the most ridiculous things: a fresh napkin every 5 minutes, a different bottle of water, a specific type of olive he knew the hotel didn't carry. Each time, Elijah returned with a calm, measured response, never once letting irritation cross his face. To the onlookers, it was entertaining. To Vincent, it was a challenge. The night wore on, and Vincent grew bolder. When the appetizers were served, delicate arrangements of truffle-topped delicacies, Vincent accidentally brushed Elijah's sleeve with his wineglass, staining the crisp white shirt beneath the uniform jacket. Gasps rippled through the table, but Vincent only chuckled. "Careful there," he said, his tone dripping with mock concern. Elijah excused himself briefly, returning minutes later in a fresh uniform, just as composed as before. That calmness was like fuel on Vincent's fire. By now, other guests had noticed Vincent's fixation. Whispers floated around the room, curious glances exchanged between men and women who recognized the familiar glint in Vincent's eyes, the glint of a predator enjoying his sport. And yet, beneath the glittering chandeliers and the hum of polite conversation, a different tension brewed. Elijah's silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. A strength that unsettled Vincent even if he didn't realize it yet. As dessert approached and the live auction began, Vincent decided it was time for the final blow, a public spectacle that would leave the room buzzing with his name on everyone's lips. He had no idea that the man he sought to humiliate was not the prey he imagined, but a storm waiting to break, because Elijah Cole wasn't just a waiter. And before the night ended, Vincent Harrow's carefully curated empire of arrogance would come crashing down in front of the very audience he sought to impress. The gala buzzed with opulence as the live auction commenced, each item fetching astronomical sums that made the crowd gasp and cheer. A rare diamond necklace, an exclusive wine collection, a week-long stay at a private island resort. Each lot sold for figures that could feed entire communities. But to these people, it was a game, a performance of generosity designed to cloak their insatiable hunger for prestige. Vincent Harrow sat comfortably at the center table, flanked by men who mirrored his arrogance and women draped in couture gowns. He basked in the attention, casually raising his paddle with the kind of careless authority only obscene wealth could buy. Every time his number was called, applause followed. He soaked it in like sunlight, grinning as though the world revolved around him. And in that moment, he truly believed it did. But amid the glitter and grandeur, Vincent's focus remained fixed. Not on the auctioneer, not on the socialites fluttering around him, but on Elijah. The young waiter moved quietly among the tables, refilling champagne flutes, collecting empty plates, his demeanor as steady as before. No trace of irritation, no flicker of anger. That composure infuriated Vincent more than any verbal defiance ever could. It felt like defiance in itself, a silent refusal to be broken. Vincent's mind churned with ideas, each more twisted than the last. He wanted to see cracks in that facade. He wanted to strip away that calm and expose the vulnerability beneath, because there had to be some, he told himself. Everyone has a breaking point. The opportunity came when a hush fell over the crowd. The auctioneer unveiled the evening's star attraction, a rare painting by a renowned artist, valued at nearly $2 million. Gasps rippled through the audience as the bidding began, paddles flying in rapid succession. The tension in the room was electric, and Vincent? He couldn't resist making this his stage. He shot his hand up without hesitation, his voice booming as he called out a figure that silenced the competition. 2 million. All eyes turned to him, admiration and envy mingling in their gazes. Vincent smirked, relishing the moment. The auctioneer's hammer fell, and just like that, the masterpiece was his. Another trophy for his collection. Another reminder to the world of his dominance. As applause echoed, Vincent motioned for Elijah to bring him another drink, loudly, so everyone heard. When Elijah approached with practiced grace, Vincent leaned back, his tone dripping with mock friendliness. "Careful this time," he muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to catch. A ripple of chuckles followed. Elijah, unfazed, poured the champagne with the same steady hand as before. But Vincent wasn't done. When the final course arrived, a delicate soufflé presented with flourish, Vincent decided to make his move. He gestured toward Elijah with a smirk that promised cruelty. "You know," Vincent said to the table, pretending to confide, "I always wondered how these guys handle the pressure. One slip, and the whole night is ruined. Imagine dropping one of these." His words hung in the air like a taunt, and several guests exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Vincent's games, but none dared intervene. Not yet. As if on cue, Vincent shifted his arm, accidentally, bumping the tray Elijah carried. A glass tipped, crimson wine spilling across the pristine white tablecloth, blooming like blood. Gasps erupted around the table. Vincent feigned shock, his hand flying to his chest in mock horror. "Oh no," he drawled, his tone theatrically sympathetic. "What a mess." Elijah froze for the briefest second, then moved swiftly, dabbing at the spill with a napkin, his expression calm, still calm. Vincent's smirk widened. He expected embarrassment, stammered apologies, maybe even tears. But Elijah gave him nothing. Nothing but quiet efficiency, as though the humiliation didn't touch him. And that was when Vincent decided to go further. "Tell you what," he announced loudly, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "Let's make it interesting." His grin was sharp, predatory. "If you can carry that entire tray," he pointed to a towering arrangement of glasses and plates, "across the room without dropping a single thing, I'll tip you—" "What? $500? Laughter rippled through the crowd, though it was tinged with discomfort. Some shifted in their seats, others avoided Elijah's gaze entirely. But Vincent basked in the attention, reveling in the power of spectacle. All eyes turned to Elijah. For a moment, silence stretched thin. Then Elijah nodded once, his voice calm but firm. "Of course, sir." He didn't flinch, didn't falter. He simply lifted the tray with effortless precision and began walking, each step measured, steady, unshaken by the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. Conversation stilled. The room watched, breath held, as Elijah navigated the gauntlet. Vincent had set. He reached the far end of the room without so much as a tremor. Not a single glass wavered. And when he returned to Vincent's table, setting the tray down with surgical precision, a smattering of applause broke out, hesitant, then growing. For a moment, Vincent's grin faltered. Just for a moment. Because, instead of shame, Elijah had turned the spectacle into a quiet triumph. The very thing Vincent sought to degrade had only elevated him. But Vincent wasn't done losing. Not yet. Fueled by a cocktail of ego and resentment, Vincent doubled down. He leaned in, voice low but venomous. "Don't get too proud, kid. Tricks like that don't change what you are." The words dripped with contempt. Elijah met his gaze for the first time, and something in those eyes, a glimmer of knowledge, of power, made Vincent's stomach tighten. but he brushed it off. He's just a waiter, Vincent told himself. A nobody in a rented tux. And then came the moment Vincent would never forget. The lights dimmed as the auctioneer returned to the stage, announcing the final segment, a surprise. Guessed who would address the room. Murmurs swept through the crowd, curious faces turning toward the back as a spotlight cut across the hall. Elijah Cole, the announcer declared. Philanthropist, investor, and the primary benefactor of tonight's event. Time seemed to stop. Vincent's laughter died in his throat. His smirk froze. Every eye in the room swung toward Elijah, who, in a single fluid motion, removed his waiter's jacket and draped it neatly over a chair. Beneath it, his attire transformed, sleek, tailored, commanding. He stepped into the light with the ease of a man who owned it, applause swelling like a tide behind him. And Vincent? He sat paralyzed, his mind scrambling for air as realization crashed over him. The man he'd spent the night humiliating, the man he reduced to a prop for his cruelty, wasn't a waiter at all. He was the reason this entire gala existed, the reason these millionaires gathered. The man whose name carried weight in circles Vincent could only dream of entering. And as Elijah strode toward the stage, his calm smile spoke louder than words. The game had never belonged to Vincent. It never would. The applause thundered through. The grand ballroom as Elijah Cole ascended the stage with the quiet confidence of a man who needed no introduction. Though tonight, his introduction had shattered every illusion Vincent Harrow clung to. The spotlight bathed Elijah in gold, his tailored suit gleaming under the chandelier's glow, his presence commanding without effort. This was no waiter. This was power personified. And the man who had spent the evening as a prop in Vincent's cruel theater now stood at its pinnacle, the room hanging on his every move. Vincent's chest tightened as the truth settled like lead in his gut. The name Elijah Cole wasn't unfamiliar. It was legendary in investment circles. A name whispered in boardrooms, splashed across financial magazines, associated with billion-dollar deals and transformative philanthropy. Elijah wasn't just wealthy, he was untouchable. And Vincent, who had prided himself on dominance, on control, had spent the entire night publicly demeaning a man who could dismantle him with a single word. The laughter that had fueled Vincent hours ago now roared like ghosts in his head. Every cruel remark, every staged humiliation, replayed in merciless detail. His smirk had been his crown, and now it lay shattered at his feet. But the real blow, the killing stroke, was yet to come. Elijah reached the podium, his calm smile radiating an ease that made the silence heavy. He spoke, his voice deep and measured, resonating across the marble hall. "Good evening," he began, his tone smooth as silk. "First, let me thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. Your generosity has been extraordinary. Together, we're making a real difference." His eyes swept the room, warm and composed, yet when they brushed past Vincent, they lingered. A fraction of a second longer, sharp enough to cut. Vincent shrank in his chair, his mind clawing for an escape. He won't say anything. He can't. This isn't personal. It's business. The mantra looped in his head like a lifeline, but deep down, he knew better. This wasn't just business. Not anymore. Elijah continued, his words flowing effortlessly, as he spoke of the Foundation's mission, of building schools, funding healthcare, transforming communities. The audience hung on every syllable, moved by the clarity of his vision. But Vincent barely heard any of it. His world had narrowed to the pounding in his ears and the weight of unseen eyes. He could feel it, the subtle shift in the room. People remembered. They remembered the spilled wine, the taunts, the cruel wager with the tray. They remembered Vincent's smirk. And now, they saw it for what it was. Pathetic. Then Elijah paused, just long enough for anticipation to thrum through. "The air, you know," he said slowly. his tone soft but laced with steel. Tonight reminded me of something important. His gaze fixed on Vincent like a spotlight, invisible to the others but burning all the same. It reminded me why humility matters, why true strength doesn't need to humiliate others to feel powerful. A ripple of silence swept the hall. Because no matter how much wealth you have, no matter how high you climb, the way you treat people, that's what defines you. The words landed like hammers. To the audience, it was wisdom. To Vincent, it was a blade sliding between his ribs. His throat tightened as Elijah's smile returned, gentle, almost disarming, but his eyes told another story. They told Vincent that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Elijah moved on, announcing the final donation totals, thanking key contributors by name. Each acknowledgement was met with applause, but when Elijah said, "And a special thanks to Mr. Vincent Harrow for his spirited participation tonight," the clapping carried an edge Vincent couldn't ignore. It wasn't admiration, it was irony, laced with pity. The stage lights dimmed as the event concluded, but the real show was just beginning. The walk of shame as guests rose from their tables. A tide of murmurs rippled through the room. Vincent stood on legs that suddenly felt foreign, his usual swagger replaced by a stiff, stilted gait. He tried to smile to mask the storm raging inside, but every glance felt like a verdict. He could hear it in their whispers, see it in their polite, too bright smiles, the judgment, the schadenfreude. The predator had become prey. And then he saw Elijah, standing near the exit, surrounded by a constellation of influential figures. They laughed, they listened, they leaned in. Elijah didn't need to seek attention. It gravitated to him. And as if sensing Vincent's stare, Elijah turned. Their eyes met across the room. One calm, assured, unshaken. The other a hurricane of dread. Vincent considered leaving, slipping out quietly before the whispers hardened into headlines. But pride, that venomous serpent, wouldn't let him. He walked toward Elijah, each step echoing like a drumbeat of doom. Conversations hushed as he approached, curiosity crackling in the air. "Elijah," Vincent began, his voice hoarse, forced into politeness. "I didn't realize—" Elijah's smile widened, warm and cordial, yet carrying the weight of unspoken truths. "Mr. Harrow," he interrupted smoothly, "I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk." He extended his hand, and Vincent took it, his grip clammy against Elijah's steady hold. The circle around them tightened, eager for the spectacle. Elijah leaned in slightly, his voice low enough for only Vincent to hear, but the softness in his tone was a razor's edge. "Power's a funny thing, isn't it? One moment you think you own the room. The next, you realize the room owns you." He released Vincent's hand with a pat that felt like a verdict. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." And with that, Elijah turned back to the crowd, his laughter ringing like a bell, leaving Vincent standing there, exposed, dismantled, irrelevant. The crushing blow Vincent stumbled out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring as panic clawed at his chest. He needed to salvage this. He needed control. Pulling out his phone, he fired off messages to his board, his partners, anyone who could reaffirm his place in the hierarchy. But the replies, when they came, were perfunctory at best, evasive at worst. Word traveled fast in these circles, and tonight's story would travel faster than most. By morning, Vincent wouldn't be the man who bought a $2 million painting. He'd be the man who humiliated a billionaire benefactor in front of the entire city elite. And Elijah? Elijah wouldn't have to lift a finger. His silence was punishment enough. As Vincent sank into the back of his limousine, his reflection, in the tinted glass, mocked him, a man who mistook cruelty for strength, arrogance for invincibility. And now, stripped of both, he understood the truth Elijah had wielded so effortlessly. Power isn't what you take from others. It's what you give without losing yourself. The city didn't sleep that night. not in the circles where Vincent Harrow's name once sparked admiration. By dawn, the headlines were everywhere, plastered across news feeds, whispered in boardrooms, dissected in hushed tones over overpriced lattes, charity gala drama, Millionaire humiliates event benefactor. When ego backfires, Vincent Harrow's public fall from grace. Clips from the evening, grainy, phone-shot fragments, flooded social media. Vincent's smug grin as he taunted a waiter, his exaggerated gestures during the spilled wine debacle, the cruel tray challenge that made guests squirm. And then, the reveal. Elijah Cole stepping into the spotlight, name announced like a thunderclap, while Vincent sat frozen, his laughter dying in real time. The internet didn't forgive. It feasted. Memes sprouted overnight, side-by-side shots. A Vincent's smirk and Elijah's calm smile captioned with lines like, "Stay humble, or life will do it for you." Hashtags trended. Know who you're talking to. Cole effect. Harrowed. The story had everything: wealth, arrogance, comeuppance, and the world devoured it. Vincent's world collapses by morning. Vincent's phone was a graveyard of unanswered calls and curt messages. His partners, once eager to bask in his glow, now kept their distance. "We need to reevaluate our association," one email read. Another was colder. "The board feels this incident reflects poorly on our values." The contracts that had defined Vincent's empire, the sponsorship deals, the investment pledges, the joint ventures, evaporated like mist. He tried to spin it, to frame it as a misunderstanding, but no one was listening. The damage wasn't just reputational, it was financial, existential. The crowning blow came in the form of a terse letter from the city's economic council, withdrawing its support for a major development project Vincent had championed for years. The reason? Concerns regarding professional conduct and alignment with community values. Translation: no one wanted his name on their marquee, not anymore. And beneath the ruin, humiliation festered like an open wound. Vincent couldn't escape the stares, on the street, in restaurants, even in the sanctuary of his own office. People looked at him differently now, not with envy, with pity. The very currency he'd hoarded, status, influence, respect, had been burned to ash, and in its place lay a void Vincent didn't know how to fill. Elijah's quiet triumph. While Vincent scrambled in the wreckage, Elijah Cole moved through the world unchanged, or so it seemed. He didn't gloat. He didn't tweet veiled jabs or grant sensational interviews. His silence was louder than any headline, his grace more devastating than vengeance. When pressed by reporters, Elijah offered only this: dignity isn't about what you own. It's about how you treat people. Last night reminded us all of that. The clip went viral, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, with sincerity, without venom, without the need to twist the knife. And that, more than anything, cemented his legend. Elijah Cole wasn't just a billionaire philanthropist. He was a symbol, a mirror held up to a society drunk on power plays and hierarchies. His calm composure in the face of humiliation made him untouchable. His restraint made him unforgettable. Behind the scenes, Elijah didn't sabotage Vincent's businesses. He didn't have to. The world did it for him. Investors withdrew because reputation was currency, and Vincent's was bankrupt. In a way, Elijah's greatest revenge was that he didn't seek any. He simply lived his truth, and the weight of that truth crushed Vincent more thoroughly than any calculated strike ever could. The last meeting. 2 weeks later, Vincent found himself in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of a building he didn't own. The irony wasn't lost on him. This was Elijah Cole's headquarters, a sleek monument of steel and glass that exuded understated power. Vincent hadn't asked for this meeting. He'd begged for it. Through intermediaries, through shared acquaintances, through any thread he could tug. And now, here he was, sitting at a table that felt colder than marble, waiting for a man whose mere presence had rewritten the trajectory of his life. The door opened, and Elijah entered, not with an entourage, not with fanfare, but with the same quiet assurance that had unsettled Vincent from the start. He extended a hand, and Vincent took it, though his grip lacked conviction. "Elijah," Vincent began, his voice low, stripped of its usual bravado. "I wanted to apologize. For everything." Elijah regarded him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "I appreciate that," he said simply. No lecture, no grand monologue, just a calm acknowledgement that made Vincent's shame burn hotter. I was hoping," Vincent stammered, "that maybe we could find a way forward. Professionally." Elijah's gaze was steady, kind even, but firm as stone. "Vincent," he said softly, "this was never about business for me. It was about respect, and respect is earned long before deals are made." The words were a verdict, gentle yet final. And with that, Elijah rose, signaling the end of the meeting. Vincent remained seated, the weight of his downfall pressing him into the chair like chains. When the door closed behind Elijah, the silence was deafening. The moral echo in the weeks that followed, Vincent vanished from the headlines, replaced by fresher scandals. But the stain lingered, a cautionary tale etched into the city's collective memory. His empire fractured, his name tarnished. Vincent retreated from the spotlight he once craved, forced to reckon with the truth he'd spent a lifetime outrunning. Power isn't permanent. Status is smoke, and the way you treat those you think are beneath you, that's the measure of who you really are. For Elijah, life moved on, quietly, gracefully, without the need for victory laps. His foundation's initiatives expanded, fueled by record-breaking donations inspired by the viral story. Schools were built, hospitals funded, lives changed, and somewhere, in the echoes of that ballroom humiliation, a simple truth rang clear. Kindness isn't weakness, humility isn't submission, and arrogance is a debt life always collects, with interest. As the city skyline glittered against the night, two men stood on opposite ends of its shimmering promise. One, diminished, a cautionary whisper. The other, ascendant, a silent testament to the power of grace. And in that contrast lay the final lesson. The tables don't just turn. They flip, and when they do, it's never the table that breaks. It's the man who thought he owned it.